Hello, welcome. My name is Alicia McDaniel. I am the founder of a virtual gallery online, and today I'm speaking with our exhibited artist, Palija Shrestha. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here today with us. Firstly, I wanted to say congratulations on your grant from Art Together. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me too.
Yeah, and with that, I guess the best way to kind of segue into our conversation, I think if you could just open up with a statement about your exhibition and sort of maybe like a few influences on your recent body of paintings.
hmm well, this series is a painting of five. I've been thinking about this series, I think, in the last 2 years, and only this year it kind of came um, into life, I guess. Um, I was really thinking about what it means for me as a person to come here and be here. And so that kind of looped into that tiki zhya, meaning looking through the window, right? Like tiki zhya swoebale. And basically thinking about the five elements from the Newari culture, and really thinking about, well, four elements we know, which is like just normal for everybody, right? Fire, water, air, earth. And then we also had this thing called, and I researched into it because I had asked my mom and my grandmom and so on from my family, and really thought of what is that fifth element that we talk about. And there's a lot of research on this, and mostly it's in English. And so in English, it says space or air, or space or ether. So that was something that was really interesting to me, that space could be anything from, you know. So that's something that I was really looking into. And I think another thing that I was also really interested in this series is that what I really didn't know that was happening was, like, I was kind of like whenever I talk to my parents, or do like a Skype, or a Viber call with them, really thinking about like how the space between us has evolved, but also how it's like linked together, even though we're like so many very very far away from each other, literally literally 11 hours away from each other. um so really thinking about that and taking that into effect, and I was kind of like taking snippets of those videos that I'm having with them, kind of like if I'm like talking to you right now. So I'm like just taking snippets of them, and like wherever there's like highlights, or like there's like a glimmer, like right now, for example, on your glasses, right? Like that purple light, which is, just actually very normal, but it was just like so kind of exciting to kind of grab that moment. So that's basically what I'm looking into. And this is, I've always done work that's very personal for me, but I think this series is, I kind of, yeah, it's like more personal. I think also because of the pandemic, probably I'm like really thinking about, like drilling down into, and actually there's a piece right there in the back. Really drilling down into the what am I doing part, and like why am I doing. And to be honest, I wasn't really thinking about like why I'm doing. I was just like I need to do this, and this needs to be done, kind of. um so that's something that I was looking into. And um f- from what kind of influenced me to do this, the second part of your question, Um, I've always been interested in like abstract paintings, but in some ways, whenever I whenever I made them, I couldn't, for maybe because I'm living here, and I got my art degree from here. I also got training in Nepal, of course, but also from here. Um, that kind of always made me, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say an outsider, but I always, double think like, does this do I like it's not even do I fit in, it's more like, is this me, or like am I trying to be someone else? I'm always like questioning myself, right? And so I think at this time it was important for me to really take that. um I think I've always like thought of those like five elements internally, but I never really thought about, okay, like I'm going to work on this. So this kind of series really played to that role, into being like, okay, so I'm really going deep into this and like doing my research into what it is that I'm thinking about. So there's more than like images of artwork. I would say I'm really more looking into like, um, I'm really looking into research and paper about things like what it means to be a Newar, and like how am I here and what does this mean. And in terms of images itself, I'm looking at the traditional I'm looking into the traditional mandaps, or manda. That's how it's called in Newari, but I think everyone knows at this time it's also kind of westernized. It's called mandala. And so those aspects of a mandala, which have four elements, and also the in between fifth element in there. So that's kind of what's really influenced me into doing this series. I don't know if
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what I'm really excited about that you really touched upon in your statement right now is that there's so much metaphorical and physical reflection that you're making. What really drew me into your statement that I read on paper about your works was that your paintings function as this sort of metaphorical window into how you're seeing through the lens of your ancestors. And I thought that was really beautiful. And I think that's really cool that you're also doing some physical reflection too about your identity and your placement and your heritage. And just like kind of one of the questions I had was actually about the pandemic. Just sort of this, is there like, if you could explain the connection between like this metaphoric window in your paintings to maybe like your physical window, were you thinking a lot about the space you're in while you're making these works during the pandemic?
yeah, it's thanks for that question. It's really with the pandemic itself, during the start of the pandemic, I was kind of planning to go to Nepal, back home, because my grandmom was sick, and I mean had been sick for like she was battling cancer. So she's been sick for like 5 years. And at that time, I had just finished graduation, and it had been like a year that I'd been living here. So I was like, okay, I really need to go. And I was planning to go, but then right before, I mean, during the pandemic itself, I was like, okay, I really need to go, because it's, that urgency of like we need to do this right now. And it's not, we can't really like push things that we have ideas about, and we don't have the choice to really push it anymore. Kind of that urgency really came about during the pandemic. Um, but of course, during that time, we had our lockdown and stuff like that, and we couldn't really, travel. And we also didn't really know what really, the pandemic could do, and And of course, it's very devastating currently as well, still um, in some places, although we kind of walk with our masks off right now here. um, so during that time, me and my husband, we didn't really get out of the house literally for 2 months. Yeah, literally, like we didn't even do grocery shopping because we had, my husband is like he has everything, like he stocks everything, so luckily we didn't have to go out. And it was just kind of a I'm sure for everybody it was an interesting time really to reflect on. And I was also thinking, like, as an artist, like my husband would say, like, oh my god, like it's so hard, blah blah blah, and I was like, yes, it's hard, like it was hard for me too, but in some way, like, to be honest, like just the thinking about just living inside a room that in an apartment that you have had for like 2 months, for me it wasn't really, I feel like I've done that before as an artist. Like I'm always in my head, like thinking about these stuff and doing research and like, you know, so I mean, people are going to be like, oh my God, criticize me and be like, oh my God, she said didn't really make any sense. But
Oh, no.
yeah, but that time was interesting for that 2 months. And then during that time, my grandmom passed away. And so that was one of the reasons why I was, and still, and also my aunt also passed away because of cancer last 2 weeks ago. So this time has really been like a I don't know, it's kind of a sad in terms of the urgency of life and what is life really about, and what are the things that we've come, and is there really a meaning to that? And also, yes, there is, like so many questions and so many unanswered questions kind of like floating around, right? Like, and what is it that we really have to do? And kind of like your question, this beginning of your question, like looking from the window itself, like yes, we were kind of sitting inside looking outside,
Mm.
either thinking about all the things we could do or also doing the things that we can do and just contemplating those things. So I think in many ways it's been poetic and frightful,
Mm.
um sad, but also, there's a lot, I think a lot of us have had time to really think about like what are our priorities, so in that way, I think in that way it kind of like tied it all together, if
Yeah,
that makes any sense.
no, that does. And thank you so much for sharing. And I just wanted to say I'm really sorry about your loss. And yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to just appreciate everything you've been through and sort of where you are now and where you are with your work. And um, yeah, I mean, it's been, yeah, I mean, there's no words to really put it. It's been terrible last year.
Yes.
And yeah, and I really understand where you're coming from about as creatives, we're used to creating in times of isolation and confinement, and even times of tragedy, and even just personal despair. I mean, that sounds dramatic, but there was a lot of tragedy this year. And I think that what's interesting about the pandemic is it was, for some folks, a great time to kind of like slow down and really be alone with themselves and maybe the work or their surroundings. But for some other people, maybe it was really challenging to find comfort in that isolation and sort of find any motivation to pick up a pencil or a paintbrush. So,
Shortly.
yeah.
Actually, me too, so it was
Hmm.
kind of 50, I don't 60% of me.
Hmm. Yeah. So,
It's more like I feel like for me, it's more like a deadline
mhm,
thing, like where I'm like, I feel the word despair, right? Like super like you're drained and you can't do anything else. And then one day you're just like, oh, but and then you start doing it. And then the next day you're like, okay, I can't do it. I don't have any motivation to do anything. So I think that was also definitely there. That's like,
mm,
yeah, something that's undeniable.
yeah. And I guess next question I had for you, just kind of keeping into just thinking about I guess like where we are physically in the space. I'm really interested in this like other element that you mentioned about ether space and yeah, I guess to simply put it, is there any advice for other either emerging or starting artists who are interested in working within the family archive or working with elements of their ancestry or sort of similar themes that you're dealing with in your work? I guess so. That's a big question, but maybe to simplify that. Yeah, is there really a place where you recommend starting that personal investigation?
Um, yeah, well, I think that, each one of us are very unique as to
Mhm.
where we come from. And at this point of time, so much of us have been also hybridized. And so there's that kind of sweetness to that as well, right? Being like a global citizen, kind of, quote unquote. And also just where you come from and kind of really breaking that down into what is it that interests you the most, or if you have questions. Because for me, the questions that I really had were exciting, to really it was exciting for me to research because it made me that much closer to my parents, that much closer to my aunts, uncles, and grandmoms, grandfathers, like, because I couldn't get so much of what I needed, like my question. I couldn't get so much of that just from reading books, right? Of course, there are like research on that, you know, which are, I think, mostly from like a third person perspective. But it's, I think, that much more sweeter to get that from a family archive per se, and it's that much better and heartbreaking almost, to get that family archive. And also like just kind of like the essence of that, that little focus is like that, that you are important, or like where you come from is important for this day, is, I think, I mean, I'm still figuring out, I don't yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and honestly, thank you so much for speaking with me today. This has been really great. And I'm really excited for you to keep making work in this vein. And yeah, I really appreciate everything. Um, I asked all of my questions. You answered all.
Well, thank you. I had a great time talking with you. Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Felicia. I'll be in touch with you. Yeah.
All
Guess
right.
we sign off. Have a great night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.